It's Angie, and you are listening to Midlife Magic and Mayhem. Hey, did you know I have a newsletter? Well, I do, and you can subscribe to get weekly notes from me at angiebird.com/subscribe. And I'll link this in the show notes. Because, social media is, we all know how that goes. This way, you won't ever miss any announcements or programs or events or special essays from me. So go subscribe, angiebird.com/subscribe. Now, on to the show. Devotion and ritual. Two topics that we don't talk a lot about in mainstream culture, but have become a real focus and curiosity in my life over the past few years, especially in the past year. What do devotion and ritual do for us? How can they change our experience of living? And what does it actually mean to us? What happens when we combine devotion and ritual with sexuality? This conversation is with Anne Moore. Anne is an internationally acclaimed sexologist who helps people just like us to discover love, freedom, and sex beyond our wildest dreams. And is deeply intuitive, profoundly grounded in sacred ritual and the body, and offers support at the highest level in the art and science of sex coaching, sexological bodywork, trauma release, and dissolving shame into loving self-acceptance. She provides private coaching and bodywork, inspired speaking, workshops, events, and online group education about sex, embodiment, devotional practice, and erotic mindfulness. Her clients and students rave about her proven approach to clearing shame and stuckness and using joyful, mindful, erotic play as a pathway to self-discovery and spiritual evolution. Anne and I dive deep into devotional practice, what it looks like for her, why it's important, and why it's also important to include devotion and ritual into our sexuality. This is a gorgeous, rich conversation with a woman who lives her magic and mayhem with real wisdom and depth. Please enjoy and allow yourself to feel my conversation with Anne Moore. All right. Hi, Anne. How are you?
I'm really good, Angie. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Great. Thank you so much for being on Midlife Magic and Mayhem with me. I appreciate your time being with us today. So tell me a little bit about you, just to give the listeners some context of who you are and a bit about your story and how you came to be who and where you are today.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, it's so appropriate for your podcast, particularly in this theme. I am a poster child for midlife transformation and really I've always been working toward this work, but in the last, especially 6 years, I just did a massive life change and dove totally into sexuality as the doorway to everything, to enlightenment, to health, to embodiment. So I'm a certified sexological body worker. This is all in the last 6 years, this piece. Certified sexological body worker. I'm a master coach in the erotic blueprints and train other coaches in doing that, as well as working with humans on that. And work with some other modalities that are more energetic and spiritual and transformational. It's all transformational. But it's really about being in this body. And how can we live our life from this place with a lot of joy and belonging in our own sexuality, belonging in our own creativity and expression, and in relationships. And I just turned 60 last year. And that was a big journey all by itself of embracing being 60, embracing eldership, embracing being an older woman and what that means in our society, and all the crap that I was dragging with me, all the stories about what it is to be menopausal, what it is to be older, just a lot of fears and ridiculous notions that I have been clearing away at a great rate. Yeah. So, and I work a lot. My people, my demographic is a lot of midlife humans who are reinventing themselves and recreating relationships and wanting to find that newness and spark that was there maybe in 20s and 30s or at the beginning of a relationship, and they're finding it now. So yeah, late bloomers going crazy.
I love it. I love it. I have such a near and dear place in my own heart for that as well, because
Yeah.
I have had my own version of that in my late 40s and, well, 50, really, in the past like 3 or 4 years.
Mhm.
And kind of waking up and walking, and it's almost like walking through a doorway and going, wait a
It
minute, how
is.
did I
It's
get
exactly
here?
like that. Yeah. Well, I think it's more of a cocoon. It was for me. It was not a doorway. There was a whole big thing in between that was very messy. So yeah. Yeah. But then total like rebirth, really, in many ways. Yeah, I hear you. And I've seen you. So it's so exciting to watch.
Talk a little bit about, you said a couple of minutes ago about cleaning away, clearing or cleaning away some of these
Clearing away. Yeah.
fears and things. And like, what has that looked like for you over these past several years?
Yeah. So one of the big ones was menopause. And I didn't realize it was actually pretty like a slow process for me. I think I had an easy time compared to a lot of people. And I realized there was a point where I was on hormone replacement and I had never stopped having my period. I didn't stop having my period until last year, 59. I know, right? I
Whoa.
mean, it changed, but right? I know, mind blowing. But so as things were changing around 55, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll do some hormones. And I didn't really look that carefully into it. But it was great. I felt super alive, very juicy. And I got a really big fibroid that was getting bigger and painful and causing bleeding and all uterine. And was told that using HRT, so hormone replacement therapy, was feeding it estrogen, and that was an issue. And so I was debating what to do, and I was so scared to stop the hormones. I thought I would dry up and disappear. I was like, where is that? Like, who taught me that? What is that? And I like fear, really big fear, shame. And as I felt into it, I realized I'd been getting bombarded with messages about this my whole life. Like when we talk about older women, it's like old biddy or, old hag or old lady, or in a way that's so dismissive. And the witches and the fairy tales and just like all of this conditioning. And I didn't feel like that at all, but it was in me. And so I had to acknowledge those fears and the shame, especially the shame, in order to be able to start to like bring it into the light and love those places and integrate and write a new script about what it is to be alive and vital and sexual and joyful now that I'm 60 and turning 60 and feeling a lot of pressure to like not share my age. It's crazy. Even like dating apps, especially like oh my God, it's crazy. Like people are so willing to lie about it and feel like they have to. And there's deep, deep shame in there. Such big shame. And I really turned the prism to, I definitely don't want to be around anybody who doesn't want me exactly as I am in this minute, at this age, with every lived experience I've ever had. That's what makes me amazing. And so, like anything else, it's like shifting from, oh, I'm so sorry that I am the way I am, to, oh my God, if you won the lottery, because you get to hang out with me.
I
And this
love
is
that.
how I
That's
am.
fantastic.
Right. Yeah. And I have to say the blueprint work was helpful for that, because it was a similar process where I found out like I'm really big erotically, like in the blueprints, I'm a shapeshifter. So I'm like all the things. And I had a lot of shame about that, about like, oh, I'm so complicated and I keep changing it up and people can't keep up with me and I'm just too picky and too much. And to shift that to like, I'm a Ferrari, I'm a Stradivarius. It's amazing. I don't even know what all these bells and whistles do, but like let's find out. So it was a really similar process to just be in boldness of I don't know, can I swear on this podcast?
Oh, yes.
Oh, so it's
Please
just
do.
losing the fucks to give, like just like spreading them far and wide. It's, like a flower girl at a wedding. I'm like tossing the fucks out left and right. I don't need them anymore. So.
Well, I love that too, because especially the point about being big, like the boldness and the bigness. Because I think, I don't know, I have a theory that I think a lot of us have that, even if we don't think we do. And everybody is different, and everybody's coming from, with their own set of history and lineage and body chemistry and everything that we all, have and come with. But I do feel like I hear that so much, and it's almost that secret of like, I'm afraid of being too big.
Right. Yeah.
And then we like scare ourselves even from saying that. And yeah, I mean, I was with a group of women last year doing over several months, and one of the women at one point said that she's like, I'm afraid I'm going to be too much. And I went to her during a break of this thing that we were doing, and I said, you can be as much as you want to be with me. Wow. Let's go. Let's do it.
That's the best permission.
Right? I mean, and it's because I feel like you said,
bring it. We want more.
Please. Like we need that.
Yes.
Like we need us to be our biggest, boldest, brightest, shiniest selves, and trust that we'll know when to turn the volume up and when to turn the volume down, if that's necessary. Like, even if it's, maybe it never is, but that we know how to handle ourselves.
Yeah. And that we can actually show up as we are and feel like we belong to ourselves, and not be doing those little ways where we lie about who we are so that we don't scare people or lose them.
Absolutely. And the other thing that you said about with the hormone replacement therapy, even like the fear around giving that up. So if I'm hearing your story correctly, so you stopped it.
I did. I was gonna follow.
And you didn't dry up.
The story.
You did not dry up.
Not. I actually went cold turkey, and it was great. It was amazing. It was this it really felt like a passage, like a rite of passage. And it was right at the middle of COVID, or beginning of COVID, I guess. And it was almost the same process in some ways as deciding to stop coloring my hair. I realized it was a little way that I was lying about myself to everyone I met and saying, please look at me as a younger person, because that has higher value than who I actually am. And once I could actually feel that, there was no turning around. And it was helpful because I don't know if you remember, but in COVID, like there were all these people shaving their heads and everybody was going gray because we couldn't like color our hair anyway. So I had company, and I think that really helped. I had a couple other women who did it at the same time as me, and it was like, yes. Yeah. So there was a little bit of freedom, and also never looked back. Like, what was I thinking before? And it's an interesting place because I don't want to be judgy about people who don't feel comfortable yet taking on this really deep conditioning. There's a lot of age shame in our society. There's tons and tons. And it's scary to confront. I think you need a lot of support and backup to be able to do it. It's really hard to do it by yourself. So I just want to offer that. And for the hormone replacement, I stopped taking that. I have used a few different herbal supplements since then. I've consulted with some people on that. And actually the thing that's been the most working, meaning like adding juiciness and vitality, is breast massage. It's a really ancient tantric technique of really centering your sexuality in your heart and your breasts, and spending a lot of time with massage. It moves lymph. It's really great for your body. It creates, I forget which hormone, prolactin, I think is what it creates, but also endorphins, oxytocin, and just feeds me hugely. So that's been the thing I think that's been the biggest needle mover, and it's really fun. It feels good.
Yes.
And it's brought me back into deep devotional relationship with my breasts. because, and I don't even know if it's back to, because I'm not sure how devotional I was before, but I know that when I breastfed my son, I did it for like 4 years. And then after that, I was like, I didn't want to look at them. I didn't want to touch them. I would wash them, but that was about it. I felt like they'd changed shape and it wasn't okay. And so this process, I had done some work around this before, but the breast massage is the biggest piece of just like literally loving on myself in this place, in my heart. It's my heart.
That is so beautiful. And I think we can also get, well, there's so much around the messaging and the conditioning around age, which I want to come back to that.
Yeah. Well, it relates because breasts, it's like they're supposed to look like their 18-year-old breasts versus like they're a beautiful shape that they are and they're awesome. So yeah.
And they're supposed to be exactly how they are. Right. And I get you too about not being judgy, because the also part of this conversation is, if you want to go and be in your body however you want to be in it, great. And if there's tweaks and things that are happening, so be it. If not, that's great too. Like curling your hair, not curling your hair, this thing, that thing. And really being from a loving, neutral place.
Yes.
Because I agree, like, I mean, I see it in myself all the time. And sometimes I'll even have this kind of inner dialogue of, okay, I don't want to fall into the conditioning of trying to look like I'm 25.
Right.
And yet I like dressing up. I like wearing makeup. I like looking good. Sometimes I like the color of my hair. Sometimes, like I like my skin to look a certain way. And I question myself. I'm like, is that truly me, or am I falling into the conditioning?
Yeah. And I guess for me, it is about being in choice about it. Like I can kind of put on my girl costume when I want to, or my woman costume, and I can go be something else if I want. I've done a lot of that in my life. I'm grateful for that. Like I was a rock climber for a long time, and I learned to do welding. There was a time when I would go from welding metal in metal shop, go change, and then go to belly dance that same day. It was very flash dance. And it really did feel like I could shapeshift, but that also that I was choosing to be where I was fully, and I could change it. And so I guess it's stepping out of, like, if you feel like you can't leave the house unless you have makeup on, that's maybe something to be curious about.
Yeah, I feel that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a difference there. It's like I get to do this thing. I get to play this and adornment. I can adorn myself however I wish, with jewelry and all that. And it's play and it's fun and it fills me and it feels good. That's a different place of coming from than I can't leave the house without makeup. Right.
Yes. And adornment is a devotional practice. It's it's one of our most basic human things to do, is adorn ourselves. We've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. And can it come from love? Of like, oh, I want to just hear these earrings jingle and see them and see the flash. And I love that. And it enhances my experience of being alive. So I want that.
And that, to me, like, even when you were just playing with your earrings there, like that, I got a hit of the erotic. Like, that is eros. That is the life force energy that comes through eros and animates all of life. Like, so if that's the thing that has you come alive, and you can really get a sense of, like you mentioned, embodiment a few minutes ago, like really get a sense of if that places you firmly in your body, then
yeah. Right. And adornment can take so many different forms. And it is like in all the goddess traditions that she comes adorned, like she is like everything is an adornment. And that means everything's an adornment. So like, can you go out and like smear yourself with mud and have that be a delicious adornment? Like there's so many ways to express it that's like really juicy and alive, versus I can't look in the mirror unless which is hard because you have to look in the mirror to put makeup on. Like I can't love myself until I have changed what I see artificially because somebody else told me I had to. Mm-hmm. That's a really different place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes we don't even realize that the part of somebody else told me, like, it doesn't even sound like somebody else.
No,
It just is.
yeah,
It's just always there. It's always around.
right. Or
And
it's been in our
so,
head since we were 3, and so we don't recognize that it's not actually mine. Like, what's mine? What do
mm,
I love about me?
and I think that's such an important question, is what's mine?
Yes.
What is
And
it
how do
that's
you know?
mine? Exactly. How do you know? How do you know? Like you, Anne,
How do
how's your
I
practice?
know?
Yeah. How do you know it's for
I
you?
pause and feel it. I feel it in my body. And I feel for a sense of like flow and congruence. And if there's tension, if there's something holding, if there's then I get curious about that, because there's probably something in there that maybe isn't mine that's getting in the way. And that's a practice. It's a cultivation. That's not something I was born with. Well, actually, it is something I was born with. And then I got taught out of it. And
Exactly.
I had to relearn it. It's something we're all born with. We just forget. So, how
Mm-hmm.
do you know?
Very similar. And it definitely, it's a practice. It is, coming to relative stillness
Mm-hmm.
and rolling in, not blocking things externally, like all the external can be there, but kind of a turning towards and becoming into relative stillness, and feeling in my body, feeling for what's there, using the senses, coming into center.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's funny because sometimes, I don't know if language can really do a lot of this justice. It is such an embodied, felt sense of what it is that we're talking about.
Yes.
But I think what I would say to try to explain it further is that turning towards myself, becoming centered, becoming grounded, getting still, and just taking a few deep breaths,
Mm-hmm.
and and being with that question: is this mine? What is mine? Does this feel resonant in my body? Does it feel gritty in some way?
Yeah, like a
Scratchy?
sand in an oyster, right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
I guess that piece for me, I'm very much about somatics in the body. And so it's about sensation, particularly what actual sensations are happening in my, is there buzzing? Is my breath short? Do I feel tension in my solar plexus? Like, or do I feel like there's a sense of openness and ease that gives me information about what I'm feeling and often what I'm thinking that I don't even know I'm thinking.
Very true. Very true. All right. I also want to circle back about the breast massage just for a minute.
Yes,
Because
please do.
so
It's
good.
really good.
Yeah. So we were talking about the release cold turkey of the hormone replacement therapy, and then
Mhm.
using self breast massage for continuation of what can possibly help with cultivating the juiciness.
Cultivating and nourishing and replenishing. Yes. So in this teaching, and it's very gender binary. So I just want to call that out. Like, there's a whole gender spectrum. But in this case, it's more about, if they're for male identified cock body humans, that their sexuality really is centered in their genitals. And our society takes that as the norm, like we do for everything else, that the male body is the norm. It is. And yet we are not male bodied. For humans with breasts and vulvas, that the center of sexuality is really heart and breast. It's really here. Like, this is generative. This is where it arises and then feeds to genitals. And it's the opposite. It comes from genitals to heart for masculine energy, masculine bodies. People are embodying that. So I had been trying to start from my genitals forever. Like, that's what I was taught for a long time. A lot of my trainings in the last 6 years have been like, no, you can play with the whole body. I was doing that, but I hadn't really centered on heart and breasts until finding this teaching and working with it myself. And I had these stories that because I had breastfed for a long time, or because I was older, that my I can swear, I can use lots of explicit words. So pussy, I use pussy, was just not as responsive, was drier, was not, like, wasn't getting started in the same way. And that was when I was going to genital touch sooner than my body really wanted to. When I start here with breast massage and actually just presence and awareness in my breasts, in my nipples particularly, it changes everything. There's like this flowering and opening. And I had this story too, that my nipples were desensitized because I had breastfed for so long. Not true. What has changed is I don't like really direct finger, like pinchy, kind of like super direct, but palms, unbelievable. Like moving an entire hand around is a completely different experience. And then I get all the energetic connection with the chakras in the palms. Like, that's amazing. And there's one thing in particular I loved. It still just blows my mind, which is to just hold my hands on my breasts with palms over the nipples and position the nipples where they were when I was born, where they were when I came into the world, because that changed. That connects me so deeply to like who I've always been, who I was when I was little, who I was before puberty. Just amazing. Like that alone, it almost brings tears. It's so lovely. And it's like an acknowledgement of what in my body has changed over time and to have a reclaiming. Yeah.
That is absolutely gorgeous. And I've never heard of, breast massage and, I'm familiar with some practices around that, but I've never heard this described in quite this way.
It's
and
really
I'm so
lovely.
grateful, because what I love about it is lovely. It's not strange. It's
Devotional.
beautiful. It's natural. And it is absolutely
Yes.
devotional.
Right. This is me honoring this body as this body in all my softness, in all my roundness, in all my.
And especially the piece about putting your nipples back where they were when you were young, like that just completely, like I felt that.
Yeah.
I've never thought that before. What a place to go.
Right. There's just a sense
Back
of
to our
alignment.
freedom. Yeah.
Exactly.
Back to our freedom.
Yes. Back to our freedom before we were viewed as sexual beings, when we could just walk around the world shirtless and just be ourselves.
Yeah. A quick story. I was recently with my daughter, visiting my daughter in college, and she's in the southeastern United States, and it was warmer down there. And we were at this pool, and this mother was there with her two young girls, and one was maybe 5 or 6, and one was probably 2 or 3. And they were there, and the younger one just ripped off that shirt,
Yep.
and my daughter, who's 20, poked me, and she was like, "That's amazing." She's
Right?
like, "I love that so much." I'm like, "Yes." And the mom just like totally let it go, didn't freak out or like, she was just like, and I loved it. There was so much freedom in that young little girl. And it was just, she was so embodied and so loving where she was. And it, like, I could feel the air on her skin.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it was that,
Yes.
like, it was that delicious.
Yeah. Like her doing that for all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you think about it, like we were at the peak of our confidence about like, we just smartness and being in our bodies at around 10 or 11, like that's when it's like, we're not worried about boys. We don't care. We're just, like doing our thing. And we just have it wired. We know enough, we're like, we can move around. And then it starts to shift. And did you ever read, was it Saving Ophelia? Is that the book? She does a lot of research around that, about what happens with girls once they go into puberty. They lose their voice. To pretend. That's when we really start to pretend that we are different than we are, because we're so desperate to fit in and be considered attractive. And I remember that was around the time that I started to dumb down my vocabulary in certain circumstances. I didn't want to look too smart. And so I would deliberately tweak how I would speak. I was very deliberate. Yeah.
It's fascinating. The ways that we shift and morph into, and especially being a shapeshifter.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
right? It's like,
Yeah,
it makes sense
anyway.
in so many different ways. Like, we're good at turning ourselves into whatever we need to be.
Yeah.
Let's talk about devotion.
I would love to.
What does that mean for you? What is devotional practice?
Yeah, I was sitting with this. I do a lot of devotional practice and have been really deepening this in the last couple of years. It is about relationship at its heart. It is about relationship with mystery, with the unknown, with something beyond me that is in this world, that is connected to this natural world and also beyond. Like, it's this place where all of that meets. What I have been learning and leaning into is that it's a physical practice. It can be imaginative. It can be like in my mind. It can be, if physically expressing devotion changes everything. It changes my nervous system. It changes how I can be in the world. And it is about repetition. That's one of the key elements. It's about practice. It's choosing what I want to be devotional to. And ultimately, it's devotion to and with myself. It elevates me. It changes me in the doing. Yeah. It's an expression of deepest longing. What is it for you?
Well, I have about 100 questions.
Okay, great.
Just about that, what you just said. I won't ask all of them. And then we can get to what it is for me. When you say it's physical, paint me a picture of that. What does it look like for you?
So I am among other, well, okay, I've been doing this in lots of different ways, in ancestry practices, honoring my ancestors. So the physical practice there had been, for the coldest months, every morning I would light a tiny fire. Tiny fire. First of all, I would go out. I'm lucky enough to live in a place that has a lot of woods around me. So I found out that pine needles and pine cones are really great for lighting tiny fires and little twigs. And I mean, tiny, like it was in a little cauldron, or I had a fireplace, but it would be like not logs, like sticks. But I would light this tiny fire and then I have offerings. And so I had some lavender from our yard that I had dried, and I would burn it in the fire and say out loud greetings to my ancestors, greet the four directions, but then also greet particular ones that I had a relationship with. And the saying out loud was really important, the vibrational expression of this. And to do it roughly at the same time every day in roughly the same place also was important. To have a space set aside for this, a space in my time, in my day, and a space, physical space. And for me, it also is a way to align with the cycles outside my body, greater cycles. So cycle of the day. So I was doing this in the mornings. Cycle of the moon. So I would be doing something different, new moon, full moon. Right now I'm in a practice where every Sunday I go and visit the mama tree, which is a tree I have a particular relationship with here in Boulder. It's this beautiful, beautiful, huge cottonwood that is at the curve of a stream. And if you go into the stream bed, which you can do in the wintertime, the roots come down in this flow of roots and bark that looks like elephant trunks or a lava flow. Like it just feels deeply elemental. And so this tree is just, I fell in love with this tree immediately. And then learned about that there are actual mama trees, that they nurture the trees around them. And so every Sunday I visit this tree and sing to her, and I bring her flowers. I pour water. Devotional practices are sensual. So like pouring and dripping, and I have a little red ochre and I smear that on the trunk, and every time I do it, it deepens the relationship. And every time I do it, I come away feeling I'm investing in an important relationship, just as I would a friendship or a lover.
Speak to that a little bit about the relationship.
Yeah. You know what that does? As I am caring for this relationship, I can feel my belonging. I am practicing belonging. I am practicing feeling welcome in these places and welcoming what's there, other energies, other entities. And it is exactly the way that I approach sex as well. And what I encourage for my clients is, can you be in your own body in front of another human body that's so magical, that's alive, and just be in wonder in this moment at this experience. And who cares what happens? Like, right? Like, you could touch each other, not touch each other, breathe, just be, just lie together, have intercourse, not have. That's amazing already. And to come back to that, to practice showing up for each other, is practicing belonging.
That's exquisite. The belonging just hits so deeply. Because again, as I'm imagining these things that you're doing in the devotional practice and the ritual of it, right? And I think ritual is also something that's so important that we in our culture have stepped away from in so many places. But like as I'm imagining these things that you're doing and this piece of belonging, like what came up for me was how lonely that people feel these days and
isolated.
Isolated, and the extent of depression, anxiety, nervous system dysregulation, like all the things that are out there, and how, yes, do all the things that you need to do. And what if including devotional practice, especially connected to nature,
right?
Especially connected to something bigger than yourself, whatever that is for you. And then, starting there with that relationship and with that belonging. And then what does it look like when you do bring it into relationship with another human being?
And it's like anything else. If you're already in the cultivation of this wonder and belonging, and you do it regularly, and you access it maybe several times a day even, it's so much easier when you're in front of another human being to do the same. It's not any different. And it's experiencing them as teacher as well. Like, what can I learn when I open to this human? And what can they learn from me? For the mama tree, for example, such an example of belonging. She's deeply rooted, hugely rooted. So when I feel like, maybe I'm feeling in scarcity or I'm, not enough or something, I don't know, I feel dysregulated in some way, I can go and visit the mama tree and just feel that rooting and rising, which is a basic human energy and a cosmic, like in the universe, that's what we do. We root to rise, and so many things do. You can just, you can just feel it. And by repeating this, by practicing this, by making room for it in my day, I'm also feeling back into all of our lineage, because we all have done this. Every culture has devotional practices. We always have. And so we've lost it in many ways. And it's as simple as deciding to begin. And you can choose anything as a devotional object. I'm in this program right now where we just did this thing where we all chose something. And it can be a rock. In my case, it's a piece of bark from the mama tree that I'm doing devotional practice with in my own home. And at first I was like, it's just a piece of bark. And it's like, maybe that's not special enough. But then as I looked closer, this piece of bark has lichen on it. And I started to water it and it became bright green. And I'm like, oh, this is like tending a tiny sacred grove. I've got a little forest right here. Like the microcosm, anything can be sacred if you choose to see it.
And anything can be its own universe
Yes.
right underneath our nose if we're
Yes.
paying attention.
Right. Yes.
And can actually use our eyes and use our ears and listen and see. And like, I love what you said, you started to water it and all of a sudden it transforms into something.
Blossomed.
And what if you just had that bark and was like, oh, this is just a piece of bark, and I'm going to pick something else that's more quote unquote special, or
Right.
and then we miss the beauty and the absolute perfection of
And the incredible
what's right here already.
It's about listening, right? Because also in this piece of bark, then I have death, I have decay, I have the renewal of life that comes, like the feeding on that renews life, and like all the big cycles are right here. And so every time now I'm watering it every day. That's part of what I do. I water it. And I love this part. When I discovered, I was doing flowers, right? So I found a rose petal. I decided to use the rose petal to scoop the flowers. It's so like tender and beautiful. I feel like a priestess and a goddess all at once. It's so lovely. And they're just things. They're just like, they're so easily accessible. It's not expensive.
Exactly. Well, and again, and it's taking the initiative, taking the time. Not that it takes that much time, but taking that little scoop of time to start walking down the path that, like, this could really be something for me. This could
Right.
be something for me, and then for everyone that I'm in contact with.
And it transforms me and it transforms my day. Beginning my day in this way utterly changes the context.
So good. You had asked what it is for me, and this is something that honestly, to be super transparent, that I'm still cultivating for myself. Like, I'm trying different things and doing different things. And I really love everything that you said for your own practice. I was asking that definitely selfishly because I wanted to.
Yes, that's how we learn, right? Yeah.
And so right now it is like I do really like to move my body and have some stillness too. Like there's a flow between stillness and movement. I do have some things on a couple of different altars here, and a couple of things are living that I do tend to, and candles and flame and figures and different things. And like I said, we had been traveling a little bit and got back today, and I was like, I was missing it. So I had to spend some time today, like, okay.
Oh, I love that you did that.
Be here now.
Yeah.
Like all this, it's like, okay, just take a little time and settle and go back and touch, like literally touch the things.
Literally
and
touch.
Hold,
that
literally
really
physically touch, look, see, listen, smell, pick them up, handle them, because.
And then every time you do, they're charged with that. They become even more special. It's two things came up as you were talking. One was thinking about any child and their stuffed animal. That is a sacred object.
Oh, yeah.
That is an utterly sacred object that is drenched in ceremony and ritual for them. Like so meaningful. And it's better if it can be an object that you didn't just go out and buy because somebody told you it was sacred. It can be a gift from someone. It can be something you've had for a long time. It could be something you find in nature. But we have a very consumer culture. And I know people who are surrounded. They buy new ritual objects all the time and then put them on a shelf or put them away in a box or make a fancy altar that they never look at. That feels like it creates hunger and emptiness and isolation rather than belonging. Like there's a magic here that you can choose of which kind of magic do you want to create? What spell do you want to cast? And your time and your attention and your touch and your like all your senses are the gift.
And it is, and it goes back to that for me, like it turns me back towards myself.
Right.
If I'm feeling a little ungrounded or dysregulated, like those sorts of little touchstones, touch objects, like me touching things, like is really helpful for that.
Right. And if we want to get like all geeky and sciencey, you're literally co-regulating your nervous system with these objects. Like my state, my physical nervous system state changes every time I do this practice. That is part of how it changes me is I ground, I deepen, I can breathe, I can feel, I'm present, I'm regulated, I'm nourished, I'm available versus being in some kind of trauma response or stress, which is a trauma response.
How has this evolved for you?
That's a great question. It's something that I really struggled with for a long time, where I was looking for outside teachers. I had friends who would like run a new moon circle, and I thought it was great. And then in the last couple of years, especially, I started to look for people who could teach me to do this myself in an authentic way. I think I felt like anything I did would be cultural appropriation. Like there was no way that like me as a white American chick could like do any of this and have it be real. Understanding more about my lineage has really made a big difference, really hugely made a difference in belonging of like, oh, it actually is authentic for me to do Celtic practices, for example, and the animism that comes from those peoples who were indigenous where they were. That's deeply in my bones and blood. And it's real. And I'm not faking it. It was a choice to begin to practice and to feel worthy of practicing. And that as I began to do it, it became more real to me. And that made me feel even more in the sense of belonging. It's a little chicken and egg, I think. I had to cross a certain threshold of belongingness. And I had great mentors who helped me do that, actually. I got a lot of help.
Yeah, I think that's, I've been in or felt in a similar fashion to that, like really coming to a place in this phase of looking at eldership and saying, I still want to have people around me that I can learn from.
Yes.
And I want whatever's going to come to be deeply from within my own system and my own belonging and my own being and my own ancestry and lineage and culture and come from my own bones.
Yes. And to feel, again, going to the body, feeling the resonance, feeling the sensation of alignment and resonance when it's real. And
trusting that.
A lot of it, I've always been in, like, I grew up backpacking. I've always been in nature. I've always been outside and hiking and everything. And a part of this has been the decision, the choice to become more intentional about being in nature, and that my teachers aren't just human. That was probably the biggest shift, that I can have real relationship with this tree. I have a lot of affinity to rock. I was a rock climber for a long time, of mountains, granite in particular, that's real in me. And it actually extends back through my bloodline, clearly, in lots of ways that I can see and attest and feel. And so I have some very important rocks who have been my teachers. And that also is really ancient practice, that stones have been holy forever, or places. So to begin to believe that is real for me now, that actually it's only recently that we have had this split of feeling like we're separate from, which I know you've been doing as well. So.
What you're referencing is I believe is a certain type of ancestral work that you and I have both done. I started it last fall with someone here in one-on-one work. And then there's also group work, I think, where you do actually go in your own journey.
Yeah.
You go back in your ancestry to find your well ancestors, WELL, well, the well ones. Go back before trauma patterns, go back before, like when we were to the ones that were, at least this is how it feels for me, go back to the ones who were connected with nature.
Who belonged, who knew they belonged, who had no idea of even belonging because it wasn't a not belonging.
Yeah.
And then I just want to name him. I have another teacher who's amazing who I've been working with his name is Josh Schrei. He has a podcast called The Emerald. And one of the pivotal episodes of that was called Animism is Normative Consciousness, where he talks about human history and how 99.99995% of it has been connected to nature. And it's only been this little blip where we've been like, no, we're not. We're human. We're totally different.
Connected to anything. We're just out there alone, humans above everything. We control everything.
Yeah. Animals don't feel, not like us, just like all that.
I love that podcast, by the way. That's fascinating.
Isn't he?
That's so cool. That's
right.
Great.
So he's one of the ones I'm working with on this devotional and learning from him because he does it really well. And because he's sort of Joseph Campbell meets yoga. And so world mythology is a big part of this as well. And that we just have always done this. We always have.
And I think that's part of what people feel is missing. And everybody kind of feels this hunger, feels like something's missing in their lives, this loneliness we were talking about before, and isolation and all that. I think this is part of it. It's just disconnection from ritual, ceremony, nature, belonging,
and your body,
all of that, and your body. Oh my gosh.
Yes. And it's what's missing in sex for so many people.
Yeah.
That they find that sex is it's to discharge discomfort. It's a stress reliever. Get uncomfortable feelings out of your body more than anything. And it's like comfort and connection, but there's so much more available when we come to it as a devotional practice.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean you can't be silly and wild and full of grief or rage or whatever's there. It's just really loving what is.
Yeah. I know. I mean, there's like all the things that you said before, but there's also, I think in sex, there can be a neediness. Like I need this, or I have to, or I need it for you, or
there's
I have to have this for you, or obligate, there's so much.
All sorts of crazy things in that space.
Oh, I know. So much twisted up in it. If we could just get back to that simple act of just being with another human with awe and wonder.
And curiosity, reverence, and delight.
Yeah.
And that it's not, I want to be really like devotion. I think one of the things that's really twisted for us or has twisted it for us in our culture is the God above, the aboveness. The devotion is about something that's out of your reach. It's different than you. It's way beyond you. To me, devotion is very personal and there's no power over, there's no aboveness in this. Devotion is simply being fully, fully present to the unflowering of the moment in our bodies. I'm not, if I'm devoted to a lover, I'm not thinking they're better than me. That's not what this is about. It's not fawning. It's honoring. And bringing my own honor with me.
That's so good. And we do get that. We can get those things twisted up too sometimes. The fawning. If I'm in devotion to my partner, that it means that I'm not for myself.
Right.
Then I have to be for you, which there is a flow there, right? I can, there are times when we go back and forth, but it's still that, no, I can be in devotion to you and stay in my body.
Yes.
And ask for what I want. It's not an either or. We don't have to choose.
Right. You do not have to choose. No. And you said earlier, I loved what you said earlier about bigness, about welcoming that woman in her greatness. Like that to me is devotional practice, is that I bring all of me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that speaks to ecology, like the ecology of a group, the ecology of relationship, the ecology of relationship myself to other is bringing all of us there and having all of it be welcomed.
Yes. Not leaving anything behind. Fawning is leaving a whole lot of yourself behind. And there's a pretending, there's a defense in that really gets in the way of what we actually want, with this sense of just wholeheartedness and surrender to what it's not trying to control. Fawning is a way of trying to control, actually.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much around fawning. I think
Oh,
that could probably
it's
be
like
a
a whole
whole
thing. It's
different thing. I mean, I'm like, wow, all these things are like coming into my brain right now. Like, that's wow. There's a lot. I'd like to even just in my own history, in my own life. I'm like,
Me
oh
in
my God.
spades. Oh my God.
Like,
Yes.
And part of it for me is literally unraveling all of the unraveling all of this stuff now and unlearning all of this conditioning of where was I fawning? Where do I still do it? And it's not a judgment. It's not like bad girl. It's just like, oh, look at that.
I wonder if I could present in my life.
Look at that. Isn't that fascinating? Like, I wonder if I could feel more free this way or turn this direction instead of, yeah.
And just to do full circle, like we were talking about good girl at the beginning, fawning is totally good girl behavior. And if we are altering our appearance to look younger, that is a way of like fawning to all the stories we have about having to look young. It's a total handing away of power. Yeah, in a very insidious way.
Couple more questions. How has your sexual experience evolved with devotion?
It's totally transformed from performative and emphasis on like appearing sexy or having orgasms or I don't know, whatever, to really exploring what it is to be in a body. What comes to mind is one very, very wonderful experience with a lover where we decided to just choose random body parts, each of us, and see if they liked each other. And so I think it was like the inside of my elbow and like his right hip bone or something. And we just like connected them, and it was so hot and hilarious. We were laughing the whole time, and it was unbelievably hot because we were completely present in that exchange. It was so fun. It was so fun.
That's such a great example too, especially for people who have been with the same person for a long time, like people in long-term relationships. Like there's so much more. Like you think you're done. You think you know your person. You don't.
And you don't even know yourself.
There's so much more available.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece has been to like keep approaching my body like I've never met it before. Because every day I kind of haven't. Like I don't know what's going on today. And to bring that and to invite that into any kind of touch or sex, and sex with myself has changed radically. Like the whole breast massage piece is really about that.
Yeah. Totally.
And I discover right now, right today, like in this moment, what's happening. And I keep finding new self-pleasure practice is such a huge thing.
It really is.
I just discovered like petting my hip bones. Speaking of, they're coming up a lot, hip bones. And it's just running my hand over it, but there's something that happens there that's really amazing. So,
and just like you said, it is different every day. Yeah. So we can't ever get bored.
Right.
Like you have this wonderful body thing, like it's amazing.
And as we age, as we change, our bodies change. And that's amazing. We get new bodies all the time. We get to discover what's going on with this body right now. How beautiful is that?
Very beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
And thank you so much.
This was amazing. This
It's
was
so good. I feel like I feel like I'm a broken record, but I just love my people so much. And I know so many fascinating people that I'm like, I could sit here and talk to you all day long.
right. Yeah, it was delightful. I wasn't sure where this was going to go. I knew we had a sort of a general idea, but totally ease and grace.
Yeah. That's what I love. I love the organic nature of letting conversation just happen and following it to see what it wants to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much. Well, tell us a little bit too about your client work. I don't want to let you go before
Oh,
you do that.
yeah.
Tell me about your client work, where people can find you.
Right. So I work in person and remotely. I have clients in Australia and Europe and all over the US, and also people who come in to work with me in person for immersions. And I have some sort of ongoing local clients. I love to do the in-person work. It's super powerful. And I just finished a piece with a couple remotely where I've never met them in person. They were in Canada and Costa Rica, and did this beautiful ceremony of honoring and closing for them. So all of that works really well remotely. Energy work, doesn't care about time and space. And let's see. So you can reach me. So my website is yesandmore.com. So it's YESANNEMORE.com. It's just one O in more, like I want more. And I'm also on Facebook quite a bit as Ann Moore, and on Instagram as Yes Ann Moore. And I post pretty regularly. I offer a lot of free teaching that way. It's one of the ways that I like to give to people who may not be able to afford working with me privately. And I do workshops and retreats from time to time. I don't have any lined up right now, but I will. I've just been really diving into private clients right now and loving the work.
That's awesome.
And I never quite know where any session is going to go. I bring in all these, there was a session the other day that it started out with, seemed like it was body work. And then we followed the body into this energetic place. And then we got into ancestry. I don't know. And I also work with scar tissue. So I do scar tissue remediation. So for seen and unseen scars, including trauma pieces, injury, surgery, I have a beautiful protocol that really helps to unwind and release things that are held. So I'm really passionate about that as well.
And the scar tissue work, is that mainly pelvic floor? Is it?
It's everything.
It's everything. Okay.
I focus a lot with pelvic floor because I have, the people generally want, it impacts their sexual wellness. Mm-hmm. So episiotomies, hernia, various things, but also scars from breast enhancement or reduction surgeries. I work with that. Any kind of injury. And there's a whole thing on scars. I won't go too far, but basically that scars move through connective tissue. So they don't just stay at the site of the injury or surgery. And that's a lot of what happens in people's bodies is things get stuck together or hung up with extra scar tissue. So we work to melt that away and reverse that so that they can have more freedom of movement.
Fascinating. Very good. Well, I love so much the work that you do in the world. I think it's so incredibly important.
Me too.
Very important.
I'm so grateful to be doing it. So I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah. And I'll also link how to find you in all the places in the show notes so people will be able to find you. And you do post some absolutely gorgeous things. Thank you. I love reading what you write. It's really powerful. So I highly recommend it for people to go find you. So thank you again, Anne. I really, really appreciate your time, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah. And thank you for what you're doing in the world and bringing all these messages out into you're just like this funnel for beauty and creativity and wisdom. And I'm honoring you for all the work you put in to make this happen. So
great. Thanks. Thank you so much.
All right, my dear.
Thank you. See you soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
That conversation with Anne felt like a serene walk in the woods for me. I'd love to know what landed most for you. You can direct message me on Instagram or send me an email and let me know. And please subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your shows. And subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to see these conversations. And also share with your friends and follow me, Angie.Bird, on Instagram. This helps the show gain momentum and helps more women out there who are also looking to bring some magic and mayhem into their lives as well.